Now we're going to talk about something called transfer pricing. And it makes a lot of sense to understand this concept, right? We've been talking about how do we get managers to act in the best overall interest of the organization and not their own, maximizing their own bonus, right? So we've talked a little bit already about you have to be careful about choosing those performance measures for managers, because if you pick like just ROI, well, they're going to maximize that without regard to company benefit, right? So you have to pick several measures that you're looking at. And when you think about how these divisions interact, it makes sense to talk about transfer pricing, because if you're basing a manager's compensation on their costs, well, part of their costs may come from someplace they don't have control over, right? So think about the energy sector, right? If you're a big corporation like ExxonMobil, well, you've got exploration, you've got transportation, you've got refining, you've got transportation again to a retailer. So you've got different parts that are all doing things that can be done on an open market, right? I mean, your exploration people are going to end up with a bunch of crude oil that can be sold worldwide, right? So what price are we going to use to send it to our own refineries, right? So then the refiners are like, well, if you're making me pay $50 a barrel, but I can go buy it for $40 a barrel, right? That's not right if you're going to base my compensation based on my return on investment when you're charging me more, right? So you have to figure out how you're going to do this transfer pricing, right? Because responsibility centers are now interacting. All right. And of course, you want them to act in the overall best interest of the company, not just their transfers, not just their own responsibility center. So there's kind of three options for transfer pricing. One is the two responsibility centers negotiate between themselves, right? Or the company just says your transfer price is the cost, right? Because we're not trying to make a profit off each other, so we're going to pick variable costing, or we're going to pick full absorption costing, and that's it. The cost is the cost. The transfer price is the cost. That's a way to do it. Or for these things like we were just talking about, barrel of oil, there's definitely a market for that. So whatever the market price is, that's what you pay the responsibility center that's selling it, right? It's easy, it's available, and why would you pay them less? They don't have to sell it to you. They could sell it on the open market and get that price, right? So you should just have to pay the market price. So those are kind of the three ways, right? So it kind of makes sense to talk about when we're negotiating, right? So letting managers negotiate kind of preserves that autonomy and lets the managers make the choices, and the managers have the most information, right, down at that level. So, they know more about the cost than anyone else. So why not let them determine that, right? So when we talk about negotiating, it's not like from 0 to infinity, right? I mean, there's a range where you're going to be negotiating within. And so when you think about it, the selling division, right, determines the lowest price. In other words, well, unless you pay me this amount, I'm not selling it, right? So the selling people determine the lower limit, and the buyers determine the upper limit. I will not pay any more than this, right? So that's the upper limit. So you're negotiating in between these 2 points, right? So that's your range. What the selling division, the lowest amount the selling division is willing to accept, and the highest amount the buying division is willing to pay. So that's what we call the transfer price range. All right, so how does this work, right? Well, they're going to negotiate based on what it costs them, right? So the selling, I guess, transferor, right? Whoever has the stuff that's going to be transferred, the seller, you could call them, they're going to make their decisions based on how much it cost them, right? And how much they could sell those for on the market, right? So that's going to affect their negotiations. How much does it cost me to make, and how much can I sell it for on the market? And the buyer is going to negotiate based on how much they can buy it somewhere else. And that's about it, because they have to have that product. They're either going to buy it from the selling division, or they're going to buy it from some outsider, right? So, and this works across the board. In this example, it's oranges, right? But it could be computer chips, or it could be barrels of oil, right? It could be anything a company makes and transfers to another part of the company, all right? So, that can be purchased on the open market. So anyway, so we need to know how much does it cost the people to make it, and how much can the other party buy it for out on the open market if they're buying it. So here we go. So here's what we got. We've got we're talking about oranges, and we've got a grocery store that sells oranges, and we've got a orange grove that grows oranges. All right. So here's their capacity, 10,000 crates. It costs them $10 per crate variable. Their fixed costs are 100,000. And if they were to sell these, they could sell them for 25 a crate, right? And here's Grocery Mart, right? They need 1,000 crates of oranges, and they can just buy them, then go on the market and buy them for $20 per crate. So we have to figure out what the lowest acceptable transfer price is for these guys, right? So yes, they can sell them for 25 per crate, but you know, I can sell them for less than that based on my costs, right? I mean, I can sell them at cost if it's within my own division if I want to, right? The transfer price, the lowest they can accept, is variable cost per unit plus contribution margin on lost sales divided by number of units, right? And of course, obviously, you're the buying division, right? If you're buying, well, it's just like the transfer price needs to be less than or equal to what I can buy anywhere, right? I mean, why'd I pay more for you, right? So they can buy they can buy oranges at $20 per crate, right? So here, that's their highest price, right? And in the orange grove, well, they can have some negotiating room, right? Because as we know, that you can negotiate based on your variable costs, as long as you are covering those. Anything after that is going towards your fixed costs. So you can negotiate some, especially if you've gotten to your break-even point, right? So we know there's some stuff, right? So we can look at that. Also, if you don't have an outside supplier, so if your only choice is your other division, well, you're not going to pay any more than your profit would be, right? Right. So minus the transfer price, right? So you're not going to pay any more than what you would make beyond those things. All right. So let's suppose. So remember, part of this equation is the total contribution margin on lost sales. So if I'm gonna, so I can only make 10,000 crates of oranges per month, right? So if I sell you all my crates, well, I only need to sell them 1,000. So that only leaves me 9,000 crates. So, but if somebody else is willing to pay me $25 a crate, right? Oh, I may not sell it to you. I may not have any room to make it to you, right? But let's suppose that the Orange Grove has 3,000 crates. We can do it, right? They want 1,000 crates, so that's no problem. So using this formula from over here, right? Using this formula, we go, the transfer price is greater than or equal to $10 plus, right? So that's the variable cost per unit, which we get from over here. Variable cost, $10. Divided by contribution margin on lost sales. Well, there is no lost sales, right? So because we got that, divided by 1,000. So 0 over 1,000 is 0. So 10 plus 0 is 10. So there's the selling division's lowest price. We can sell it to you for our variable cost because it's just using our idle capacity, right? So fixed costs are covering capacity, right? And yeah, no, this isn't giving us anything towards capacity, but as long as we cover our variable costs, who cares? We got the capacity, it's sitting there. Now, do they want more? I suppose that manager, if they're a profit center, they're going to want more than 10, but that's their rock bottom. And of course, the buying division is not going to pay more than an outside supplier, and we know they can buy them for $20, right? So $20 is the buying division's price, right? So the range is $10 to $20. So now they can split the difference or whatever, but they can negotiate that, right? And figure that out. So that's if there's idle capacity and they will lose no sales to outsiders, right? Because remember, these are oranges. I mean, grocery stores all over the world buy them. So, why sell them to our own division? In this case, we got idle capacity. We're not losing anything. May as well sell them to you. Now, let's suppose there is no idle capacity. They're selling everything. As much as they can grow, it's going out the door. So if they want to sell 1,000 crates to Grocery Mart, okay, so if they want to sell these crates to Grocery Mart, they're going to have to give up 1,000 crates, right? So the contribution margin is 25 minus 100 minus 10, right? So what we can sell it for minus the variable costs. So 15 times 1,000 divided by 1,000 is equal to 15 plus 10 is equal to 25. All right, so that's the cheapest they're going to sell it to the grocery store that's even within their own company. We're not selling these for less than 25. Well, the grocery store can buy them for 20. They're never going to pay more than 20 for a crate of oranges. So guess what? There is no range of transfer prices. The Orange Grove will just keep selling their oranges to outsiders. The grocery store will keep buying their oranges from some outside vendor. All right, now there's some idle capacity, right? So in between, right? So now we got 500 crates, right? So we can give you 500, but you need the buying division, the grocery store needs 1,000, right? So we plug that in our little formula. So basically variable cost per crate, the contribution margin, so 25 minus 10 is 15 times 500, this time is equal to, instead of 15, it's equal to 750. 750 plus 10 is 1750. All right, so here's the lowest possible price, 1750. And these guys are paying $20 to outside vendors. So now we have a range of 1750 to $20. So we can negotiate from there, right? And so now it's up to whichever department head is a better negotiator, I guess, to try and squeeze a little more, get it, orange juice. Try and squeeze a little more juice out of the other one. All right, so is that a good idea? Should we do that? Well, I don't know. You don't want to get people creating a non-cooperative atmosphere. You want the selling and the buying transfers to kind of come to an agreement, and you don't want them pitted against each other. So a lot of places don't go with negotiated transfer pricing. You know, I don't think I would like to be a manager somewhere like that. It sounds kind of cutthroaty. But anyway, maybe that's what you want. I don't know. So a lot of times they just go, well, you know, we got to keep our stores running. You know, part of the organization, something that's important to them is customer service. They don't ever want to have stock outs, and so it's important that that's why they bought this orange grove, to make sure they always have a sufficient supply of oranges. So orange grove, you're transferring at your cost. You know, because that's the deal. That's what you're here for, is to sell to us. Hey, if there's extra capacity and you sell outside, fabuloso, that's great, but you're selling to us and you're going to do it at cost. And that's how that's going to work. Well, you know, when you do that, you're maybe not optimizing your profits, right? You have to look at some more stuff, right? It may be that it's more profitable to keep the customers happy and always have oranges on the shelf. You know, there's a lot to look at. I don't want to make it sound like there's just one thing to consider. There never is. All right, but the selling division can really not truthfully be considered a profit center, because they'll never show profit on any internal transfer. You'll just have to call them a cost center. And doing this doesn't provide incentives to control costs, right? If they're not a profit center, if they're a cost center, you know, you're not giving them a lot of incentive to control costs there, so, unless you come up with a different way. All right, so what's your other choice? So negotiations kind of lead to tough feelings, maybe not optimal for the company. Maybe some manager optimizes their profits, but maybe not company profits. Transferring at cost doesn't seem great, but it could be. It just depends on, you know, really what is your real objective here, right? Market price, that's pretty easy. They're talking about oranges. Everybody knows how much oranges cost. You can buy them. You can buy them on the futures market. You can buy them on the spot market. Right now, today, oranges you can buy, right? Caseloads of them all over the world. So a market price approach does work best when it's sold out to outside customers and there's no idle capacity. A market price doesn't work when there is idle capacity, right? So you're obviously maximizing company profits means sell it for the most you can get it. If it's external, sell it to them, right? So if you had a situation like what we had there in idle capacity, if they can sell them for 25 and their sister division can buy them for 20, I don't know how that works, but maybe they're in different parts of the country, and you know, the grocery stores in Florida where there's lots of oranges, they only cost 20. The Grove is in Texas where there's not as many oranges or something, or it costs a lot, or they're in South America and it costs a lot to ship or something. So anyway, yeah, so it doesn't work so well when there's idle capacity, because may as well use that up. All right, so transfer pricing. Don't base it just on one don't base it just on one measure, right? And again, we're going to talk about more performance measures and balanced scorecards in the next chapter. This is just to get you thinking about how best to incentivize the different responsibility centers. So let's talk about service centers. What about human resources? How does that come in? What about janitorial services? What about accounting? Right? What about those accountants? They're not really profit. They're definitely cost center. How do we share that? Right? Well, we've got a pretty good idea of operating departments, right? They're the how we make our money, right? If we're retail, it's purchasing inventory and selling it. For manufacturing, it's manufacturing inventory and selling it, right? We have some type of operations, and that's our purpose. That's why we're here. Now, every organization needs service departments. They need, you know, people to clean up stuff. They need human resources. They need legal department. They need accounting department. They need treasury department. They need, right, maintenance staff, right? There's all kinds of service stuff that is just not really part of our organization. I worked at this one place, before everybody outsourced so much, I worked at this financial institution that had its own printing department, and they would print our business cards and our forms, and they printed everything, and they had a printing press. It was really kind of cool. Of course, that is all gone by the wayside. Now everybody orders that kind of stuff from Staples or printing places, but they had kind of a cool place. This was many years ago. As you can see, I'm kind of old. All right. So anyway, service departments. So service departments charge costs to the operating departments, right? So we don't want operating departments just indiscriminately using up our services, right? Like that place that had the printing department, I could have ordered business cards every week, or get them to send me more loan forms, right? So you don't want them just wasting your services. It does help measure the profitability of the operating departments. Better cost data, right? So we do need to build these costs in, right, into our pricing. They need to be part of it. They're not free. And the service departments need to operate efficiently. So we need to be tracking their costs. And if they're not being efficient, the operating departments will start yelling, "Hey, you're charging me this much, and I can buy that somewhere else." Right? So how are we going to charge these people? Right? So if you're the human resources department, how are you going to charge? Right? What are you going to come up with as costs? Well, you've got, just like any place else, you've got variable and you've got fixed, right? And they should be charged separately, right? They should be charged separately. That's because different departments are using different parts of your capacity and using different amounts in terms of variable, right? Your capacity is covered by the fixed, right? And your variable is how much they use, right? So variable costs should be charged according to whatever activity cost driver causes the cost, right? So if your human resources department and the thing you do for the different departments is hire people, maybe per person hired would be your cost driver. If your janitorial department, maybe per square foot cleaned, right? So a bigger department with more square footage would, be higher cost, right? So variable costs need to get charged based on activity, whatever activity seems to be the most sensible, right? And then of course, fixed costs should be based on long run average, right? So in other words, capacity, right? So if you're janitorial, and you've got different people that you're cleaning and doing stuff for, you've got some fixed costs, right? So you have to have certain people on salary all the time ready to clean up, and you've got your variables, right? So you've got, cleaning supplies and things like that, but you also have your floor waxer, right? And things like that. So you got some fixed costs, right? And so these fixed costs, which represent your capacity, right? I can clean 1 million square foot of office space. That's what I got capacity for. I've got the waxers and the mops and the people. I can clean 1 million square feet. So based on that, who has how much capacity and what's their maximum, right? I am a human resources department, and so I've got, you know, employees that I pay salaries to, and I have copy machines and desks and stuff like that. And sometimes different departments hire different amounts of people. And maybe I have a department that hires a bunch of people right before, maybe my retail department hires a ton of part-time workers right before Christmas. In November, they hire a bunch of people part-time, so that I have to keep capacity for that, right? So I have to figure out, right? I have to maintain a certain amount of capacity in my department, my service department, human resources, right? Janitorial. But who uses it, how they use it. So I have to, how much capacity you have to have, and what's the peak that these guys are doing. Right, so how do I charge this? Budgeted, variable, and fixed service. So budgeted rate, I guess we should say. You use your budgeted rate, right? So in other words, if I'm the janitorial department and I'm basing my costs on the square footage, right? The more I have to clean, the more it costs. So my variable stuff are my cleaning solutions and the hourly wages of the workers. So my budgeted rate ends up being, I don't know, $20 per square foot, maybe less than that, $10 per square foot. Costs probably even less than that, probably $2 per square foot, right? It costs $2 per square foot, right? So I'm going to have this budgeted rate for my variable costs. And my fixed service department, they get my fixed costs are charged to the departments, right? So I use my budgeted variable and just my fixed, what it is based on whatever, right? So let's look at an example. I think it's easier to talk about examples. So here is a maintenance department. Okay, so these people repair machines, I guess. And there's two departments, cutting and assembly. All right, variable maintenance are 60 cents per machine hour. So they run machines in cutting and they run machines in assembly. The more you run the machines, the more they need fixing. So, and they need maintenance, right? Oil, putting oil to keep it lubricated and I don't know, stuff like that. Dusting it, I don't know. They need maintenance, take apart and clean, stuff like that. So, 60 cents per machine hour. So here's our 200,000 per year fixed. All right, so we got two places, 60% per machine hour, 200 per year fixed, right? So here's the capacity. When they're working peak, cutting is using 60% of the maintenance, assembly is using 40%. So this is our capacity. This is our fixed, right? And variable is 60 cents per machine hour. So here's how many hours we're going to use, right? So here's our budgeted rate, but here's the hours we actually are going to use. All right, so now let's see how we calculate this. All right, so as you know, 80,000 and 40,000 are the actual use, 60% is our rate. So we're going to charge them 60 times 80, to the cutting departments, that's 48, 60 times 40 to the assembly, that's 24. So here's my variable costs, how I'm allocating them. How about fixed costs? Well, 200,000 based on peak, not hours, right? Because fixed aren't based on peak, they're just based on what your capacity is. And for the cutting, we have to maintain 60%, and for assembly, 40. All right, so there you go. So fixed is based on what my fixed costs are times the peak that they're using, and my variables are based on some driver, right? Okay, that's pretty simple, right, as cost allocations go. So let's practice this. Let's do one. Let's practice this stuff. All right. So here's an ambulance service. Okay, and there's 2 hospitals. Variable, $4.20 per mile. Fixed cost, $120. So at peak, Mercy Hospital uses 45%, Northside uses 50%. Again, we're going to charge $4.20 per mile against the actual, our budgeted rate against actual miles used for the variables. Capacity at peak for the fixed. So what is in the end, how much are we going to allocate? Well, we're going to allocate 45% of 120 to Mercy and 16,000 times 420 to Mercy. Then we're going to take 55% of 120 for Northside and 420 per mile times 17.5 miles for Northside. So what does that end up being? 121,000 for Mercy and 139.5 for Northside. So 420 times the actual, right? So remember, it's your budgeted variable cost per driver, which is in this case miles. So there's your actual miles, right? Actual miles, budgeted cost. And fixed costs is just at peak. So we said it was 45 and 55 times 120. So there you go. All right. So what's the problem? Well, fixed costs are using sometimes fixed costs can be allocated using a variable base that fluctuates a lot. So you got to be careful about choosing what you're basing it on. And fixed costs can be influenced on what happens in other departments, right? Again, you've got that separate RCs and you're giving responsibility to this RC, this responsibility center, for their costs, but a lot of their costs are driven by something else, right? So from another department. So, you know, people are going to have a problem with that. So what's a big pitfall? Using sales dollars as an allocation base. Sales of one department influences the service department costs allocated to other departments. So like, let's look at this. So here's an auto sale place. They have new cars, used cars, and parts. Service department costs $80,000, right? So they decide to use sales as the driver. Well, let's think about this for a minute. We're talking about service department. So I'm guessing they're talking about service to cars on the lot, maybe. How much service do you think new cars have relative to used cars? And parts have none. I mean, I don't know. Maybe a part could have service, but I don't know. I could see new cars needing service once in a while, you know, especially if it includes things like washing the cars or something like that. But what if you did that? What if you allocated service based on sales, right? So let's look at this. So here you go. They sold 1.5 million. They got 40,000 of the service, right? 50% of 80,000, right? What happens next year? Well, they went up. Their sales went up, and now they got 57%. Wouldn't you have complained in the first place? It's like, my new cars don't need the service that the used cars need in the first place. And B, I'm selling more and I'm getting charged more for service. I'm not using more service percentage than I was before, but now I'm getting charged more. So you have to be careful how you align these things, okay? So remember, people want to do what you pay them to do. So you have to be careful about choosing performance measures that you're using to grade people on and choosing how you allocate service costs, right? So the next chapter is performance measurement. So we're going to get into this in a little bit more detail. All right.